Have you ever felt a quiet, almost imperceptible shift within you? At first, it's like a fleeting thought that passes through your mind. A subtle feeling that something isn't quite the same. You can't put your finger on it, but it's there, lingering in the background, almost like a whisper from your soul. I remember the day it started for me. It wasn't some grand moment or dramatic change. No, it was far quieter. I was sitting in my usual spot, sipping coffee, and watching the world move around me. People rushing, cars honking, life going on as usual. But inside, I wasn't the same. There was a pausier space between my thoughts and my feelings that I'd never noticed before. That's when I began to realize something profound was happening. It wasn't the world around me that was shifting shit, it was me. I wasn't reacting to things the way I used to. Conversations that once made me anxious didn't stir me. Criticism that used to weigh me down felt strangely light, as if it couldn't find a place to settle anymore. I was changing, and it wasn't something I could control or force. It was just happening, naturally and inevitably. At first, I resisted. My mind scrambled to make sense of it. Why did I suddenly feel distant from people I used to be close to? Why did my hobbies, once a source of comfort, now feel like old, worn-out clothes that didn't fit anymore? I fought it, trying to hold on to what I knew, to what felt familiar. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was outgrowing parts of my life. It wasn't about rejecting anyone or anything. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet understanding that some connections had run their course. It felt like a tree shedding leaves, not out of choice, but because the season had changed. I wasn't abandoning anything. I was making space. Then came the doubt. Was I being selfish? Was I becoming distant without reason? But deep inside, a quieter voice reassured me. This wasn't isolation, it was alignment. My soul was moving ahead, and I had to follow. Clinging to the past felt unnatural, like forcing a door shut when the wind was pushing it open. I realized that I was not losing myself. On the contrary, I was becoming more of who I was meant to be. That sense of detachment wasn't about giving up. It was about giving into the change, to the transformation that was unfolding inside me. I began to understand that this was the universe's way of preparing me. One morning, I found myself sitting alone in the park, watching the sunrise. The sky slowly brightened, and with it, something in me softened. I took a deep breath and let go of the tightness I'd been holding in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to force clarity or find answers. I just allowed myself to exist in that quiet space where change happens without being rushed. In that stillness, I understood. Change doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It whispers. It slips into your life through small realizations and moments of unexpected calm. It doesn't need permission. It just happens when you're ready to move forward. The realization didn't come with fireworks or epiphany. It came with peace. A soft, almost imperceptible peace that spread through me, convincing me that it was okay to let go. I didn't need to understand every detail or control every outcome. I just needed to trust that this shift was leading me somewhere new, somewhere necessary. That's when I knew I wasn't falling apart. I was falling into place. I wasn't losing people or parts of myself. I was shedding layers that no longer fit the person I was becoming. The universe wasn't taking away, was clearing space for what was meant to arrive. And so, I chose to surrender. I stopped fighting the change and started embracing it. Instead of clinging to old connections or past versions of myself, I made room for new experiences and deeper understanding. I let the transformation flow through me without resistance. This is the first sign that the universe is preparing you for something big. It doesn't come with a dramatic shift, but with a subtle nudge, a whisper that tells you to move forward without looking back. To trust that the discomfort is temporary and that the new version of you is worth the uncertainty. In the quiet of that realization, I found strength. Strength not from holding on, but from letting go. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformation begins not when you force change, but when you allow it to happen. That is the beauty of the silent shift, the beginning of something greater than you can imagine. Sometimes, life doesn't just slow down, it stops. It's as if everything around you hits the pause button, and you're left standing still, unsure of what to do next. At first, it feels unsettling, like the ground has shifted beneath your feet. You start questioning everything, your decisions, your plans, even your sense of purpose. I remember that feeling vividly. One day, I woke up ready to tackle my usual routine, but nothing seemed to move forward. Projects that once flowed effortlessly now felt stuck. Conversations that used to energize me left me drained. Even the simple act of getting through the day felt like wading through mud. Frustration set in. I couldn't understand why everything that once seemed clear now felt blurry and uncertain. My mind kept spinning, searching for reasons, solutions, anything that could explain why I felt so paralyzed. It wasn't just about feeling stuck, it was deeper than that. It was as if life itself was forcing me to slow down, to stop running on autopilot and actually take stock of where I was. I tried to push through, convincing myself that I just needed to work harder, think faster, do more. But the more I pushed, the heavier everything felt. My mind kept replaying old conversations, failed attempts, and moments of doubt. I couldn't escape the weight of my own thoughts. One evening, as I sat in silence, I began to realize that maybe the universe wasn't punishing me. Maybe it was preparing me. I remembered something I'd once read. Sometimes the most profound growth happens when nothing seems to be moving. Those words settled in, and suddenly the pause didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a necessary space to breathe, to recalibrate, to let go of the constant need to produce and achieve. It wasn't easy to accept at first. We're conditioned to believe that progress means constant action. But sometimes, action without intention is just noise. I started to understand that I didn't need to rush forward blindly. Maybe this stillness was a chance to listen not to the chaos of the outside world, but to the quiet wisdom within me. As I leaned into the pause, I noticed something surprising. Clarity started to seep in not all at once, but gradually, I saw how much of my energy had been spent on things that didn't truly matter. I realized how much I'd been avoiding deeper questions by staying busy. The stillness wasn't blocking me, it was showing me a new path. It's a strange feeling to embrace a pause. It feels counterintuitive, like choosing to sit still when everything tells you to keep moving. But in that quiet space, I started to see my own patterns, the way I chased validation, the way I avoided silence by filling my days with tasks. I wasn't stuck because life was against me. I was stuck because I hadn't made room for what was trying to emerge. Slowly, I stopped resisting. I allowed myself to be in the stillness without judgment. And that's when the real transformation began. I noticed the small things, the way the sunlight warmed the room, the sound of my own breath, the quiet hum of life moving on without me. These moments weren't insignificant, they were grounding. They reminded me that life doesn't always need to be loud or fast to be meaningful. One morning, I woke up without the usual tension in my chest. I didn't rush to check my phone or plan out every minute. I just sat there, breathing, feeling present in my own skin. That's when it hit me. The universe wasn't asking me to do more. It was inviting me to be more. To be more present, more aware, more aligned with my own truth. I started to see the pause differently. It wasn't a setback. It was a recalibration, an opportunity to align my intentions with my actions. I realized growth doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like quiet, like waiting, like trusting that the stillness is shaping you in ways you can't yet see. It wasn't long before I started noticing subtle shifts. Conversations felt deeper, more intentional. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was responding with clarity. I wasn't running from silence. I was embracing it as a friend. This was the second sign that the universe was preparing me for something significant. It wasn't about making things happen. It was about being still enough to let them unfold. To let go of control and trust that sometimes the most profound changes come from the quietest moments. In that realization, I found peace. The kind of peace that doesn't demand answers right away. The kind that lets you exist without constantly proving yourself. It was in that pause that I started to rebuild, not with force, but with intention. I began to understand that the universe wasn't pushing me forward because I wasn't ready yet. It was giving me time to catch up to myself. This wasn't a pause for the sake of pausing. It was a sacred space to grow deeper roots, to become resilient from the inside out. I stopped seeing the pause as wasted time. Instead, I saw it as a necessary breath before the next chapter. And when I finally let go of the need to rush, I found a quiet strength waiting for me. One that whispered, "You're exactly where you need to be." It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like the slow rise of the sun, bringing light to places that had been in shadow for too long. I began noticing things I used to overlook, small changes in the way people spoke to me, subtle shifts in the energy of places I frequented. At first, I brushed it off, thinking I was just imagining things. But it kept happening. I'd walk into a room and instantly feel uneasy without knowing why. Conversations that once felt effortless now left me drained, as if I was carrying the weight of unspoken truths. Even simple interactions seemed layered with a depth I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't paranoia, it was clarity. It was like my mind had shed a filter, and now I could see the world without the distractions I once clung to. At first, I fought against this new sensitivity. It made me feel vulnerable, as if I'd lost a layer of protection against the world. I questioned whether I was overthinking, being too critical, or just imagining conflicts where there were none. But the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was tuned into a new frequency, one that was both liberating and isolating. It's strange how heightened awareness can make you feel both powerful and alone. Suddenly, the superficial conversations felt hollow. Social gatherings that used to feel exciting now seemed exhausting. I didn't know whether to embrace this change or resist it. Part of me wanted to return to the simplicity of not knowing, of not feeling so much. But deep down, I knew there was no going back. I remember sitting at my favorite coffee shop, trying to drown out the noise around me. Two people at the next table were chatting, but their words didn't match their energy. I could feel the tension between them, the unspoken resentment masked by polite smiles. I glanced away, not wanting to intrude on something so private, yet unable to shake the feeling that I was witnessing a truth they couldn't admit. That's when I realized it wasn't about seeing people differently. It was about seeing through the facade they put up, and recognizing that I had done the same for years. I had spent so long pretending everything was fine, convincing myself I belonged where I didn't, that I hadn't noticed how disconnected I'd become from my own truth. This new sensitivity wasn't a curse, it was a gift. It was a chance to be honest with myself, to stop masking my own discomfort and pretending to be unaffected. I wasn't just perceiving others differently, I was perceiving myself differently. And that clarity, though uncomfortable, was necessary. One evening I sat alone, reflecting on how much had changed. I wondered why this heightened awareness made me feel so exposed. Then it hit me. I wasn't used to being honest with myself. I had spent so much time silencing my own intuition, convincing myself that things were fine even when they weren't. Now, the truth was surfacing, and I had no choice but to confront it. I began to practice listening not just to others, but to myself. I noticed how my body reacted to situation, how my chest tighten around certain people, how my shoulders relax when I was truly at ease. I started to trust those signals instead of dismissing them. My sensitivity wasn't a weakness, it was my soul's way of guiding me toward alignment. I started making small changes, setting boundaries where I hadn't before, saying no to situations that didn't feel right. I stopped forcing myself to fit into places that drained my spirit. The more I honored this new awareness, the more peace I found. It wasn't about isolating myself or rejecting people. It was about respecting my own energy and choosing environments that nurtured it. It wasn't always easy. Some people didn't understand why I was pulling away. They saw it as rejection, but I knew it wasn't about them. It was about choosing authenticity over convenience. I couldn't keep pretending to be unaffected by things that clearly disturbed my peace. The most surprising part was how, as I grew more comfortable with this sensitivity, I attracted people who understood without needing explanations. Conversations became more genuine. I no longer felt the need to fill silences with small talk. I didn't force myself to stay in rooms where my energy felt off. Instead, I gravitated towards spaces that felt safe, conversations that felt real. And slowly, I stopped resenting this heightened perception. I started to see it as a sign of growth. It was my soul telling me to stop numbing myself to fit in and to start embracing the truth of who I was becoming. I didn't need to explain it to everyone. Those who understood stayed. Those who didn't naturally drifted away. This was the third sign that the universe was preparing me for something bigger. It was telling me to pay attention not just to the world around me, but to my own instincts. The clarity wasn't there to isolate me, it was there to guide me toward the people, places, and experiences that resonated with my evolving self. In that realization, I found comfort. I wasn't losing people or opportunities. I was gaining alignment. I stopped viewing my sensitivity as a problem and started seeing it as my inner compass. It was showing me where I truly belonged. In the quiet of that understanding, I learned to trust myself more, to listen when something felt off, to believe in my own perceptions, even when they contradicted the comfortable lies I once told myself. This new sensitivity was not a burden. It was a blessing, a call to live more honestly, more deeply, more aligned with my own truth. Loss has a way of stopping you in your tracks. It doesn't always arrive with loud crashes or sharp breaks. Sometimes, it's quieter, like a subtle unwinding of something that once felt solid. I used to think that loss meant losing pieces of myself, like fragments breaking off and drifting away. But lately, I've come to see it differently. It started with simple realizations. People I once held close seemed more distant, not because of conflict, but because something between us had shifted. I couldn't pinpoint when it began, but one day I noticed that conversations didn't flow like they used to. The connection felt faded, almost as if we were speaking from different rooms, through walls that hadn't been there before. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I had changed too much, become too withdrawn or too introspective. I worried that I was the one creating distance. But then I realized something vital. This wasn't about fault. It was about growth. We were no longer vibrating on the same frequency, and that was okay. Growth doesn't always mean rising together. Sometimes it means growing apart. One afternoon, I sat with that thought. I let it settle into my bones. The acceptance wasn't immediate. I wanted to cling to the past, to the comfort of familiar bonds. But I couldn't force myself to feel something that wasn't there anymore. The energy had changed, and resisting that truth only made it heavier. I found myself reminiscing about old friendships, moments that once felt so vibrant. I wanted to go back to find the spark that had once connected us. But in that longing, I realized something crucial. I was trying to resurrect something that had already fulfilled its purpose. Those relationships had served their role in my life. They had guided me, taught me, shaped me, but just because they had once been necessary didn't mean they always would be. Letting go didn't mean rejecting the memories. It meant honoring them, allowing them to exist without trying to breathe life back into what had naturally faded. I learned to separate gratitude from attachment. I could be thankful for what we shared without trying to hold on to something that no longer fit. The hardest part was admitting that moving forward didn't make me a bad person. It didn't mean I was cold or indifferent. It just meant I was making room for the person I was becoming. Sometimes, in order to grow, you have to release what keeps you small. I didn't want to be weighed down by connections that had become stagnant out of loyalty or habit. One evening, I found myself walking alone, reflecting on the friendships I had once prioritized. The memories made me smile, but they didn't pull at my heart the way they used to. I felt a sense of peace, not sadness. That's when I knew I wasn't losing them. I was setting us both free to grow without being tethered to versions of ourselves that no longer existed. It dawned on me that loss was not just about letting go, it was about making space for something new. When I stopped seeing it as abandonment and started viewing it as transformation, it felt lighter. It wasn't about discarding people. It was about allowing my path to unfold naturally, without dragging the past along with me. I started focusing on the connections that still felt alive, vibrant, and true. I stopped forcing conversations with people who had drifted. I stopped showing up where I didn't feel welcome. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace over discomfort. That's when the clarity hit. Malice isn't about erasing the past. It's about integrating it, accepting it, and moving forward without regret. I could hold the memories without being bound by them. I could honor the love we shared without trying to recreate it. One morning, as I sat alone with my thoughts, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I wasn't burdened by the past anymore. I wasn't weighed down by what could have been. I was finally at peace with what was, and that acceptance filled me with a quiet strength. This was the fourth sign that the universe was preparing me for something greater. It wasn't about holding tighter. It was about releasing gracefully. Loss wasn't weakness or failure. It was about growth. It was about knowing when to step back and let go of what no longer nurtured my soul. I stopped questioning the why and started focusing on the how to move forward with integrity, how to honor the past without being trapped by it. I wasn't abandoning my memories. I was giving them a place to rest, a place where they didn't dictate my present. As I moved forward, I noticed that the more I released, the more space I created for something new to enter. The fear of being alone transformed into a sense of liberation. I wasn't tied to anyone's expectations or stuck in outdated roles. I was simply me evolving, changing, and allowing life to flow through me without resistance. And that's when I knew I was ready. ready to embrace what was coming without dragging the past as a weight. I wasn't afraid of losing anymore because I knew that loss wasn't a defeat, it was a transition, a clearing out to make room for growth. Loss, I realized, wasn't about the end. It was about the beginning. The beginning of a deeper connection with myself and a more honest way of living. And in that understanding, I found a new kind of peace, one that didn't rely on anyone else but was rooted firmly within me. There's a moment when you realize that the person you've become no longer fits the places you used to belong. It's subtle at first, a feeling of being slightly out of sync, like a song that doesn't quite match your mood anymore. You notice that your responses to familiar situations have changed. The things that once stirred excitement now leave you unmoved. I began to see it in the way I carried myself. I wasn't tense in the same situations that used to make me anxious. My reactions were calmer, more deliberate. It was as if my presence had shifted, becoming quieter yet more powerful. I didn't need to announce my feelings anymore, they were simply there, solid and unshakable. This new vibration wasn't something I could explain easily. It wasn't about confidence or control, it was about alignment. I wasn't trying to be different, I just was. The world around me seemed to respond differently too. Some people felt drawn to this calmer energy, while others seemed almost unsettled by it, as if they couldn't place what had changed. One evening, while catching up with an old friend, I noticed it more clearly. Our conversation used to bounce from one topic to another, light and chaotic. But now, I found myself more intentional with my words, more thoughtful with my responses. My friends seemed perplexed, almost as if they were talking to a stranger. I realized then that I wasn't the same person who used to thrive on small talk and shallow connections. I wasn't cold or distant, I was just more selective about where I placed my energy. It wasn't about judging others or thinking I was better, it was about being honest with myself. I no longer wanted to waste time on conversations that didn't nourish my soul. I began to see how this new vibration wasn't just about how I felt internally, it affected my entire reality. Situations that used to challenge me felt manageable. Conflicts didn't escalate because I wasn't reacting impulsively. I listened more, spoke less, and let silence hold its place without rushing to fill it. The more I settled into this new way of being, the more I noticed how it shaped my environment. I was attracting different kinds of people, those who seemed to resonate with this quiet strength, who didn't push or demand but simply coexisted with me. Old connections that no longer fit naturally faded away, and I didn't feel the need to chase after them. This shift didn't come without its challenges. Some people didn't understand why I was changing. They questioned whether I was going through something difficult or losing my passion. I couldn't explain it in a way that made sense to them. How do you explain that you're not losing yourself but becoming more of who you've always been? I learned to stop explaining. My energy spoke for itself. I didn't owe anyone a justification for choosing peace over chaos. I wasn't trying to isolate myself, I was just following the natural course of my growth. I was no longer willing to shrink myself to fit into spaces that had grown too small. One day, I found myself reflecting on the relationships that remained. They felt effortless. The conversations were deeper, more intentional, and less burdened by the need to impress or prove something. It felt like I was finally meeting people on the same wavelength, people who saw the world through a similar lens of calm and clarity. I realized that I was no longer searching for validation. I wasn't measuring my worth by how much attention I received or how many people wanted to be around me. I was at peace with my own company, and that peace radiated outward, attracting those who could appreciate it without trying to change it. This was the fifth sign that the universe was preparing me for something significant. It wasn't about being louder or more assertive. It was about vibrating at a frequency that felt true to my essence. The more I embraced this quiet power, the more aligned I felt with the path unfolding before me. It wasn't just about staying calm in chaos, it was about choosing stillness when the world demanded movement. I learned to protect this new vibration, to nurture it, knowing that it was shaping my future without forcing it. The more I honored it, the clearer my path became. I no longer feared losing connections that didn't fit. I understood that not everyone would resonate with this version of me, and that was okay. I wasn't here to be understood by everyone, I was here to honor my own journey. I knew that those who belonged in my life would find their way naturally. As I continued to walk this path, I felt lighter. The burden of maintaining old versions of myself had faded. I wasn't pretending anymore, I wasn't fighting to belong. I was simply existing in a space that honored my growth without apology. This is what it meant to vibrate differently, to exist without constantly seeking approval, to be at peace with who I was becoming, regardless of who could understand it. The shift wasn't just internal, it was a transformation of my entire reality. I realized that I was ready for whatever was coming, not because I had figured it all out, but because I trusted the process. I wasn't trying to force change, I was allowing it. And in that allowance, I found strength. The universe wasn't preparing me to be louder or stronger, it was preparing me to be more authentic, more aligned, more me. That quiet acceptance became my new foundation. I no longer feared losing parts of my old life. I knew that what was meant to stay would remain, and what needed to leave would make room for something more fitting. I wasn't just existing, I was evolving. And that, I realized, was the real gift of this new vibration. There comes a point when the transformation that's been quietly unfolding within you becomes undeniable. You wake up one morning and realize that you're not just thinking differently, you're living differently. The way you move through the world has changed, not because you planned it, but because your soul has shifted. You've become someone new without even noticing the exact moment it happened. That's how it felt when I finally acknowledged that the universe wasn't just preparing mate, had already aligned me. The subtle shifts, the pauses, the heightened sensitivity, the new vibration, they were not isolated incidents. They were part of a greater pattern, a gradual unfolding that brought me to this place of clarity. I used to think that change had to be dramatic to be real. I expected transformation to feel like a revelation, a thunderbolt of realization that would shake me to my core. But this change didn't roar. It whispered. It didn't demand acknowledgement. It simply arrived, like a quiet dawn washing over the night. One evening, as I sat alone, I felt it deeply. A sense of completion, as if I had crossed an invisible threshold. I wasn't waiting for life to make sense anymore. I wasn't holding my breath for something external to validate the shifts within me. I was already at peace, and that peace wasn't fleeting, it was grounded. It's not that my challenges disappeared. Life still presented obstacles, uncertainties, and moments of doubt, but I didn't approach them the same way. Instead of resisting, I found myself leaning in, acknowledging the discomfort without letting it consume me. I had learned to hold space for uncertainty without trying to fix it immediately. I realized that this was the ultimate sign of alignment, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of calm within it. I wasn't fighting against the current anymore. I was flowing with it, trusting that whatever came my way was part of the path, not a detour. One day, I met someone new. A stranger who, in just a few words, mirrored back to me the clarity I had found. They spoke about their own journey, how they had learned to stop forcing outcomes and began to trust the process. We talked for hours, not about superficial things, but about the deeper shifts that happen when you let go of control. That's when I knew the universe had aligned more than just my inner world, it had started to shape my outer reality. People who resonated with my new vibration appeared naturally. Situations that once seemed chaotic became opportunities for growth. I wasn't chasing purpose, it was meeting me where I was. I stopped looking back with regret. The old version of myself wasn't something to mourn. It was a necessary phase that led me here. I could see now that every loss, every moment of isolation, every painful shedding of old identities had been preparing me for this balance. I didn't have to explain my journey to those who didn't understand. I didn't need to justify why I wasn't the same person anymore. Those who were meant to walk this path with me would find their way. Those who didn't were simply part of chapters that had closed. One morning, as I walked through the city, I noticed the world around me differently. The noise didn't feel intrusive. The rush didn't make me anxious. I was moving at my own pace, anchored in the quiet confidence that I was exactly where I needed to be. I wasn't waiting for permission to live more authentically. I was already doing it. The universe doesn't announce alignment with grand gestures. It shows up in the way you breathe easier, the way you stop forcing conversations, the way you find peace in solitude. It's the way your heart no longer races when faced with uncertainty, because you know you're equipped to handle it. That day I sat in the park, watching the world move around me. I wasn't searching for answers anymore. I wasn't questioning my choices. I was just being fully present, fully me. That's when it hit me. The universe had not changed my path. It had changed me. I was the one who had shifted, and because of that, the world felt different. This was the sixth and final sign that I was ready for what was coming. I wasn't preparing anymore, I was prepared. I wasn't looking for signs outside of myself. I had become the sign, a living embodiment of transformation. In that realization, I found a profound stillness. I didn't need to know what the future held. I trusted that whatever it was, I would meet it with this same sense of grounded peace. I had become resilient not because I forced myself to be, but because I allowed life to shape me without breaking me. And that's when I knew I wasn't just waiting for change. I had become the change. The universe had aligned me not with a destination, but with a state of being. I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was finally becoming more of myself. With that acceptance, I took a deep breath, letting go of the last remnants of resistance. I wasn't chasing alignment anymore because I realized I was already there. The journey wasn't about finding a new path. It was about becoming someone who could walk it with strength, grace, and unwavering peace. The universe had prepared me not by changing my surroundings, but by helping me evolve from within. I didn't need to look for signs anymore because I had learned to live in a way that aligned with my truth, my growth, and my purpose.